All right, we are good. Phones down. It is Thursday. We just finished the show, and Alyssa is hungry, but still doing the podcast before lunch. A little risky, but I'm ready for it.
No, the microphone's going to pick up my stomach growling.
It's okay. We're going to get through it.
I'm happy to be here with you.
I'm happy to be here with you, too. Let's dive in, because there are a lot of headlines coming out of the second Trump administration's actions, and I want to get a feel from you about what's the most concerning thing right now.
So I don't know. It's hard to say one most concerning thing, but I think thematically what I keep coming back to is I feel like his throwing things against the wall, seeing what sticks, sort of flooding the zone strategy is working with regard to how the media is covering him and how Congress is reacting to him. And what I mean by that is there is just so much happening, such a deluge of actions and executive actions and announcements that it almost feels scattershot, like the way it's being reported on, where it's like, oh, he tweeted this AI video about Gaza, we need to cover this, and now we need to pivot to this that's happening with DOGE. And it is by design. I've said this with him before, like, I don't give him, he's not 3D chess kind of thing, but he knows what he's doing when it comes to the media. And I think that he is intentionally doing so much so that there's a lot to cover, and then things that actually warrant more scrutiny, it's harder for folks to go a level deeper and know what's going on. And so an example is, I've got concerns about the DOGE cuts, despite the fact that I largely support shrinking government where you can, cutting waste where you can. But like, we don't know with some of the agencies they've gone into, say Social Security, is that going to have an impact on people's benefits? Veterans Affairs, is that going to have an impact on people's benefits? So I would love to see more reporting that goes deeper into specific cuts, not just the sort of overview of here's every crazy thing Trump did today, because that's by design and what he wants people to do.
Right. And there's reporting on the numbers not really adding up of what they're saying the cuts are and what they aren't. And but you're right. It's kind of in the weeds, all of it.
And exactly. And it's like, is that what necessarily the news consumer is looking for, is like a breakdown? But it does matter. ABC and the Wall Street Journal did have good breakdowns of the claimed savings versus like what's actually being saved. Mm-hmm. So that stuff is important. But what I'm most worried that there are cuts happening that may be well-intentioned, maybe they're not, but we haven't seen the impact yet, because down the road there's going to be a gooder service Americans rely on and they're not going to get it. And that's going to be like, oh, wow, that shouldn't have been cut.
It's interesting because for everybody, I think things become real when they affect people you know.
100%.
And we're hearing more and more stories of that. I even have a friend who's works for the federal government, who's a doctor. Mm-hmm. And, he works with the VA. Yeah. And just to hear from him that, like, oh, I've got to write these 5 things that I accomplished last week. And it's unnerving for people. It's a different world.
I totally think when the impact, that's when people realize it. I had a dear friend who was let go from, her job was folded under USAID while she was stationed in India, where she'd been for more than 5 years working on a mission there, and just overnight told, that job is no longer there. She's coming back to the States. And one thing I want to flag too is there's a disproportionate number of veterans in the federal workforce. There's a lot of programs to encourage the federal government to hire veterans. So there's also a lot of veterans that are being laid off. And I just think that's disappointing, because we have a greater duty to those who served our country to make sure, like, we don't pay them a lot already in the service, and then they're relying on these jobs and these benefits to take care of their families on the other side. And so, Jesse Waters spoke about this apparently on Fox News. His friend got DOGE, who is a veteran. Like, those are the people that we should definitely not be getting rid of. The other thing people need to know is the federal government already has a recruitment and retainment crisis. So it's very hard to get the highest skilled talent to come and work in the federal government and then stay, because the reality is a lawyer, an engineer, a scientist, a doctor will make substantially more money in the private sector.
Right.
That's why we call it public service, that they take these tours of duty to serve in government for less money, longer hours often, because it's a service. Those are the first people who are going to leave when they get these emails saying, like, take the buyout or tell us what you did last week.
Right.
They know they can make 3 times what they could in the private sector. So I worry about that long term too.
You have firsthand experience working in the White House press office. You ran the communications team. What impact do you think it will have with the White House saying that they will determine which news outlets are going to be in the press pool to cover Trump?
This has been a huge story. I actually predicted this before it happened, because in the first Trump term, he wanted to shake up the White House press briefing room. He wanted to change who had seats where. He didn't like that some of what he calls the legacy media were in the front row, where like the networks are and like the APs and the AP, the wire services. And we talked him out of that at the time, which that I don't think is like an assault on the First Amendment. I just think there's a certain protocol and standard of like who should get the prime seating. And then at one point he wanted to move the whole press corps to the Eisenhower Executive Building, which is on the other side of West Executive. It's on the White House campus, but it's not in physically what you think of as the White House. And we talked him out of that because the whole idea of the press corps being housed in the White House is so that they can cover the building and that they have immediate access when things are happening.
Right.
And they wouldn't be able to walk over without being escorted by a staffer if they want to cover something in the West Wing. I still honestly am curious if he might end up doing that with some of their offices. But this was another step. Listen, the First Amendment is not you get freedom of the press, except I get to choose who covers me. It's not democratic. It's not what you do in a democratic republic. If this were on the other side and it was a Democrat in the White House, if it was Obama or Biden saying, oh, yeah, but I'm only picking what outlets travel with me and come with me, Republicans would be furious. It is clearly incentivizing people to cover him favorably so that they get access, and it's trying to keep out people who would be critical of him. My two things. The press seems weakened in this term in a way that they weren't in the first term. I remember when Jim Acosta, then of CNN, had his credentials revoked in the first Trump administration.
That was a big scandal.
It was a scandal. It was wall to wall. Every journalist with a platform was calling for him to be reinstated. And I think within 24 hours he was. This seems to have not really the same level of collective pushback.
And do you attribute that to the weakening of the press in general?
I think it's the weakening of the mainstream press because media has become more democratized. You've got YouTube where people are doing their things. You've got mixed mediums and podcasts and stuff. So it's in some ways actually weakened like the more institutional press. But I also think people are afraid of retaliation. I think that's real. But what I will say is this. The best reporting on every White House ever does not come from sitting in the briefing room or flying on Air Force One. It's intrepid reporters who don't need to be physically in the building, but who have built sources over decades that are in the building that are going to help them uncover scandals and things that the American public needs to know about. So I would caution Trump, this is only going to tick off the press corps. It's not going to actually stop them from reporting critically on you.
I mean, I do wonder, though, because right now, what would be the actual real impact of if the White House press corps said, okay, we're not going to cover you at all in unison?
That's the thing, is it wouldn't be the same impact.
Right, because they'd fill it with other people and that aren't part of the press corps, and they would...
Exactly. And they would have, podcasters who reached millions of people there. They'd have, streamers doing it.
Right.
It's a very different world we live in things not even related to Donald Trump, just the way that the industry and media has changed.
Yeah. Wow. It's fascinating. And from your perspective, is this really just a move from the Trump White House to make sure people only hear one side and what they agree with?
Yes. He wants to incentivize press to cover him more favorably. And he sees it as almost like a bargaining chip of, if you do a good piece on me, you're going to get to fly on Air Force One.
It's all art of the deal.
Yeah, it is. And it's never how it's been done in government ever. They're doing it, by the way, federal government wide. The Pentagon, where I worked as the spokesperson, they removed CNN's offices that they'd had for decades just outside of the Pentagon press briefing room to bring in more favorable outlets. Like, that to me is a chilling effect on transparency and just like getting the unvarnished truth to the American public.
I mean, it is crazy though, because you think even people that, I mean, I feel like I think the people want the government to be challenged, but maybe the people that are in kind of in all the way on the MAGA world don't want to hear him be challenged.
That's what's so hard for me to wrap my head around in this moment. I think we've become so polarized that like Republicans want to see what they believe reaffirmed. And Democrats want to hear and see what they believe.
That's true.
Reaffirmed.
It's both ways, because during the last couple of months of the Biden administration, people didn't want to hear that he was not all the way there.
Issues around his age and
they were very dismissive of it, and they were and fought push back against it too. So I guess it's not just a MAGA thing.
It's more extreme. It unquestionably is more extreme with MAGA, but it's something that I think has just been more pronounced because we live in a polarized moment.
Right.
It's so hard for me to reconcile as a lifelong conservative, though, that we're just kind of. We've decided it is simply okay to not have Congress or the press challenging the president simply because he wears the jersey and the letter that we do.
It's very strange. I really truly believe that I would always want the press to scrutinize
the government,
no matter who is in office. But
I respected it when they were challenging me. Like when I was at the Pentagon or at the White House and they were, if it was, wait, what are you doing with this? Why is this not getting out? I would respect that they were doing it. And I oftentimes, by the way, very often, that's how I would learn of an error, would be because of press inquiry. And then I would work within government to be like, hey, this is a problem. We need to fix it. And we'd get it resolved.
No, that's
really how it
interesting.
should work.
Yeah. So
it's not antagonistic always be like, we want to destroy you. It's like, we heard from these people who this isn't happening for them. There was something related to military leave or basically like families who were relocating and they weren't getting a certain good and service because of some COVID protocol that we'd put in place. And it was flagged to me by press, and within 24 hours, I had it to the secretary and we fixed it. Like, that is also how it should work.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. All right, let's move on from politics for a minute. I want to go back to the Coffee with Your Younger Self that we did for the Weekend View last week. And speaking of the Weekend View, you can catch it on ABC News Live this weekend.
We are constantly on your TV. You can't get us off your TV.
You cannot get rid of the View, no matter what you read.
Right. I know. It's always we're getting canceled. I'm like, no, we're on air 7 days a week.
Yes, our ratings are through the roof, I promise. All right, so... let's see. So you brought up your younger self having imposter syndrome. This is a common topic we talk about on the show. I've felt that way sometimes too. But why do you think that's so prevalent in young women?
Such a good question. Well, I'll say this. Self-doubt is natural. I think no matter how many credentials you have, experience, qualifications, there is having that inner voice of saying, you're not quite good enough. You don't deserve to be here. It exists. I've had it my whole life. I have, as I've gotten older, learned how to use it as a motivator. Barbara Corcoran has a whole bit on this, and I've used it and remembered what she said, that it's like, use that just to make you want to be even better so you can't even question yourself. Because I find I'm my toughest critic. It's actually honestly not external people or factors, but I think women have imposter syndrome more. Men do too, but I just find that we are constantly second guessing. Should I have said this? Did I deserve to be there? Am I as good as I need to be? And I don't know what the cause is, but I think the best solution is use that as a motivator to keep getting even better.
I think that's right. And I think sometimes when it goes away, it's time to move on and do something else.
I kind of do think so. I think it means that you've reached it and you need the next challenge.
I think so. Gabrielle Union was with us today, and she had a question. We had a question for her that we didn't get to, as often happens on the show. It was about a message that she recently posted to women in their 30s. She basically said that your time isn't running out like social media tells you, and you have time to accomplish your goals in your life and your career. Do you feel like time is running out at this point in your life? I mean, that seems crazy. You're so young.
No, but I get what she's saying, that I think 30s are when it hits you as a woman of the boxes you need to check. Society says, okay, are you married? If you're not, that's a stress. I'm married. Do you have kids? I'm not yet. We're trying to have kids. That's like a stress. Do you own your home? Are you on your way to? Do you have this title at work? It's kind of when I think we've been told that that's all going to come together.
Right.
And life is much more complicated than that. There's so much that's been so much with my journey that's been unpredictable, not what I had foreseen, that did delay things. Like, we delayed having kids when we moved to New York and I took this job, but I wouldn't have done it differently. And sometimes you have to give yourself grace and realize there's a right time. There's no perfect time for anything. So you have to make decisions as you go, and also not compare yourselves to others. I think about my best friend from college, Rebecca, my roommate. She had her first kid at 22 and she's got 5 kids. She's got an incredible, beautiful life. And I remember for so many years being like, oh my gosh, she's so ahead of me. She's so ahead of me. It just wasn't for me, different courses. So I think it's smart advice. Your time is not running out. Actually, honestly, you're so young in your life. I haven't even hit peak earning potential yet. That's the 40s are still a big deal, and 50 is the new 40 and 60 is the new 50.
Yeah, God willing. All right. So let's get your take on this hot topic from the cutting room floor. Young couples are adding therapy to their wedding to-dos. What do you make of that? And is this because the stigma around therapy has changed? Is it important for couples to go to therapy before getting married?
Okay, so I semi-did this. Well, not quite. We were married by a priest. I'm Episcopalian. My husband's Catholic, but you have to go through pre-Cana.
Yeah, sure.
I actually highly recommend it. It's hundreds of questions that you answer and you talk to with a priest and they coach you through, and some are uncomfortable. Things are like about porn consumption. Like, does your partner watch porn? Finances, have you combined them? Do you know what your partner has? How are you going to? Questions that most of them, I didn't really care about the porn of it, but I thought were incredibly smart to talk about on the front end of a marriage. So I recommend, it doesn't necessarily have to be therapy, though I think that would be valuable too. I think a lot of couples, they get consumed by like the honeymoon phase, that we're so in love, we're so happy, and they avoid hard conversations. And the sooner you just address them head on, finances I would say are the biggest, but family can be too. You have to have talked about your financial situation. If you want kids,
right.
Even expectations with like in-laws, I think are things that you should have had beforehand, or it can create issues down the road. So I think it's a good thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, my wife's grandfather married us. So we had a conversation, but it's a little different when it's family in the room.
Exactly.
So.
Oh, my priest is our like dearest family friend. He's like 82 years old. So we're like, we're gonna kind of rush through some of these topics.
He did the same. He's like, we think we're good.
Yeah.
We're good. All right, to end on something fun, there was a story that we brought up with Joy yesterday that I want to get your take on. A woman went viral after tipping a waitress basically nothing because the waitress called her husband sweetheart. It divided the internet, though some called the wife insecure. What are your thoughts?
It is insecure.
Yeah.
I would find it so charming if somebody hit on my husband.
Really?
Like, unless they're trying to take him home. Like,
right.
He's going home with me. But people flirt with Justin. And I've never... It doesn't make me uncomfortable. The only way it would make me uncomfortable is like if a friend of mine did, because that's a betrayal. But I think my husband's handsome, and I wouldn't be surprised if like a waiter or waitress says, it makes me honestly proud. I'd tip her better probably. Yeah. No, and also like you can never do a smaller tip. I don't like, unless it's egregiously bad service. I just feel like wait staff is so underpaid already. You have
I try to do that too, and I'm looking at it and I'm doing math in my head, and I'm like, why am I even bothering?
I know.
Round up, it's fine.
And it's easier to do the math if you do 20%.
Yeah, definitely. Now, does Justin get jealous when you get hit on or flirted with?
It's funny. I think that similarly, he's usually flattered unless somebody's like creepy. Actually, I'll make this vague, a blind item. Sarah Haynes and I were at an event a while back with our husbands, and someone that we mutually know was like overly flirty with me, and that never happened to me. I would have usually Sarah's the one getting hit on, and it annoyed my husband like for days afterward.
Really?
But it was rude. It wasn't respectful of him being there, and I had to kind of be like, okay, thank you, like we're moving the conversation. That would bother him and would bother me. I mean, I would probably say
dying
something.
to know more details
I'd probably
about
spider
this.
monkey at the person, but yeah.
You're gonna come at them like a spider monkey.
Exactly, come at you like a spider monkey. But yes, no, don't go overboard. But a simple like, oh, your wife's so beautiful. He loves that.
Yeah, I can't get my wife to be jealous. Believe me, she's no interest in being jealous whatsoever.
It's such a skill. I really admire her for that.
Yeah, me too. All right, thank you for joining me today, Alyssa. It's time for lunch. Join us tomorrow on The View, where Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker is going to be here with us, and we have special guest host Ariana DeBose, which is really cool. She's also going to be here for the Weekend View, so that'll be great. Then we will see Oscar winning, going into Academy Award weekend, which is great. And then on Monday, Whoopi will come back from the Academy Awards where she's presenting, and she'll have some stories to tell. Until then, we'll see you on the podcast on Monday, and thank you so much for listening.